Hi, it's Steve, and today I have the distinct honor of talking with Congressman Eli Crane. Hello, sir.
Hey Steve, good to be with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your allocating a small measure of your precious time to inspire freedom fighters. So let's go right into it. You've agreed to talk a little bit about being a freedom fighter, to inspire and encourage folks to step up in defense of our country and for freedoms. So let me just ask you, if you don't mind, why is freedom so important to you that you have made a commitment to defend it?
Well, Steve, it's pretty simple. It's such a beautiful gift. A lot of people around the world don't get to experience it. Um, you know, I've spent a good deal of my life traveling around to places, some of the worst places on earth, who have people just like we are who want freedom, who want to be able to pray how they want to pray, say what they want to say without fear or anxiety of getting imprisoned or killed, and they just don't have that freedom to do so. And so I understand, largely because of my travels, but also because of my upbringing, um, that freedom isn't free and not everybody has it. And so we have such a beautiful gift here. And I also understand it was fought for. It wasn't, just bestowed upon us, just given to us. Men and women long before me had to fight for it. And so I just see it as an obligation to make sure that these freedoms and opportunities we have here in this country continue to exist, for my kids and my grandkids. And I also understand that if the country changes and we lose these freedoms, that I own a share of that responsibility because I didn't fight hard enough to maintain those freedoms and opportunities. And so that's what it's really about for me.
I hear that and I appreciate it. You mentioned your upbringing. Would you shed a little bit light on what that upbringing was?
Yeah, so I grew up in a home in Yuma, Arizona. My dad was a pharmacist. My mom stayed home some of the time to raise me and my brothers. She also was a secretary, for the pastor of our church. I grew up in a Christian home, where we were taught traditional Christian values. And, I grew up playing sports. And I also grew up with parents that, like I said a second ago, taught me that freedom wasn't free and that me and my brothers should really respect and hold in high esteem men and women who dedicated much of their life to service and serving others and fighting for others. And so I'm grateful to have grown up in a house like that. And honestly, it made me want to emulate, some of these men and women that weren't focused necessarily on, you know, building wealth, but they were, you know, bent on building, um, this culture and keeping this culture the way that, it was given to us, keeping these freedoms in place, etc. And so it's one of the reasons, when I was going to school in the university, and 9/11 took place, I dropped out of school my senior year to go join the Navy in an attempt to become a Navy SEAL and get into the special operations community. And it took me a little while to get there, but I finally achieved that goal. And so I was able to serve uh, in the military and serve my country in that capacity. And, that was a great opportunity for me. Not only did I get to travel to some places around the world that I mentioned a second ago and see how other people lived and, see how oppressed so many other people were, that lived under tyranny, lived under totalitarian control. But it made me, when I came back here, and I saw the direction the country was headed in, it really raised some, alarm bells for me and made me want to jump into the political arena, to try and ensure that, these freedoms, liberties, and prosperities that we've been blessed to grow up here with continue.
It's wonderful you mentioned the jump into the political arena. Would you call that jump a calling?
100%. There's no other way I would be here if it wasn't a calling. Um, Unlike a lot of political officials, I had no desire to be in public office. I was actually running a small business, um, and I felt like I was finally living the American dream in many ways. My wife and I, we started a small business um, while I was still in the military, and we got a pretty good break, and we got to go on that show, The Shark Tank. Um, it was a hit show on ABC, and we got a deal on the show with Mark Cuban and Kevin O'Leary, and we took a small business, small garage business, and we grew it, pretty substantially. And like I said, I felt like I was living the American dream. Was able to put my kids in a good school. I bought my dream house. I was able to provide for many employees. We were hiring a lot of veterans. We were manufacturing in the USA, which was a goal of mine. And we got approached by a political consultant to run for Congress in this specific district that they'd been trying to flip for a long time. It was currently held by a Democrat. And, so my wife and I, we took a couple weeks to pray about it. And we just felt like this is what God was calling us to do. So, we ended up putting our home and our business up for sale. And it was actually a couple weeks later that I received the email, because we had decided we felt like God was calling us to step out of entrepreneurship a couple weeks before we got the email to ask us to run. So it was kind of a leap of faith, but it was definitely, we felt like God had something different for us, and that's when we got the email to consider running for Congress. So it was 100% a calling, and it's one of the only things that keeps me up here today, because I don't like many parts of it.
I couldn't blame you. So is God helping you get through the tough spots?
100%. And I think that's I think that's one of the things that God calls many people into. I think there's a misconception that if you follow God, everything will be roses and peachy keen. And I found that that's not the case. But oftentimes you'll be tested, as God has tested many men and women long before me. Um, but I do find a certain fulfillment in, living for something that's so much greater than me and somebody who's so much greater than me.
That's wonderful. So is your connection to God through prayer, or how do you communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. Through prayer, um, you know, praise music, reading the scriptures, all of those things are, a part of connecting with the Almighty.
A lot of people who are concerned about freedoms in the country are not yet religious. They don't have a formal education. They weren't taught about God. They don't consider themselves religious, but their moral compass, you might say, tells them that something's up. Do you still think it's possible for folks like that to get involved, or do you think that they really need to form a connection with God first to kind of make it worth their while?
Um, I I don't think one necessarily has to go before the other. The Lord moves in mysterious ways, and I've heard some crazy testimonies throughout my life, and just how people have been led to service and led to the Lord. And actually, it's one of the coolest things about what I'm doing now. Is being able to share my faith and my testimony on a much bigger platform than I ever would have had I not done it. And so I encourage even people that don't um, consider them men and women of faith to consider serving their country in whatever capacity they can, whether it's at a school board, um, a PC committeeman, maybe running for state and local office, or even federal office, just because there's this arrogance in the United States and with many Americans that have grown up with so much abundance and freedom that they don't think that anything bad could ever happen here. And it's just a foregone conclusion that they'll get to continue living in arguably the greatest, freest country of all time. And I would disagree with that. I think that um, men like Ronald Reagan were correct when they said that freedom is always one generation away from extinction. And I said this in a hearing just yesterday. We were having a debate about men and women's sports, and I think one of the reasons this country is in so much trouble is because we've allowed God to be pushed out of everything. And anytime you watch a nation do that, it always ends the exact same way, in chaos, in poverty, invasion, and it's just calamity. And it's almost as if because we don't study history, we're doomed to repeat it.
I get that. You've very clearly illustrated the dangers we face, but nonetheless, are you optimistic?
Yeah, there are things that I see that are optimistic. I look at Trump's election with optimism. I look at the young generation of men that are growing up in this country and looking at their political bent, and I'm optimistic. I look at the fact that Americans are tuning out and turning away from mainstream media with optimism. Um, there's a lot. I see people coming to faith that I never thought I'd see come to faith, and I look at that with optimism. And so I think there's many things to be optimistic about. Um, and uh, I often, uh, I often can be guilty of looking at being critical of the overall situation. Um, but I think there's many reasons to be optimistic.
Beautiful. Well, you've given us some hope and promise. Are there any last takeaways or lessons you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think that you know, I would encourage those that watch your show to continue praying for our country. I do believe prayer is powerful. Um, I ask them to continue praying for our leaders as well, that they will have wisdom, and that they will draw near to God, right? Because the scriptures tell us if we draw near to God, He will draw near to us. And I think that's probably the best place you can be. And so keep praying for this country. Look for ways to get involved in this country. Don't just try and pass it off to somebody else or act as if you're too busy. We're all busy, but and think bigger than yourself. Think about your kids and your grandkids, and think about the legacy that you want to leave behind. So many of us were so focused on ourselves, and we really don't take the time to think about the bigger picture and what we're going to leave for our kids and our grandkids. And I think it's a mistake. And I do think that even the great United States of America can collapse if men and women don't step up. One of my favorite quotes is that evil triumphs when good men do nothing. And I've seen a lot of good men um, that I love and respect who refuse to engage in culture. And they refuse to engage in politics. They refuse to engage in the church. And I think that vacuum is always filled. And unfortunately, it's often filled by, um, wickedness, um, immorality, um, greed, and many other things. And so, look for ways to engage. It's actually a great way to be able to look at yourself in the mirror every night and sleep well, knowing that you're fighting for something greater than yourself.
Congressman, you're a wise man and a teacher. I'm grateful for your time today. I want to thank you for sharing all your wisdom. And I'm right behind you. So keep fighting the fight. Thank you so much,
Thank,
sir.
thank you, brother. God bless.